Does this sound like your child? This mom of a 13-year-old boy is concerned about his working memory, his time management, planning and prioritizing, and the fact that he's easily distracted and easily frustrated. In fact, she shares with us also that he gets good grades. There's so many kids like this. Does this sound like yours? But he spends so much time that he gets very frustrated, and he doesn't have time for games, sports, and other activities. And that's such a shame, because all of those enrich our lives and are important ways of developing as a complete human being rather than just a kid who can get good grades. She shares a lot of other information, waiting for an appointment for an ADHD evaluation. Therapy would be too expensive. We're reaching out to counselors because he's about to start high school. There's so much in this information, and obviously at a critical time. That shift from middle school, and the shift from elementary to middle, and the shift from middle to high school, always sort of ups the ante. It means that kids are going to be held more responsible for themselves, for getting their work done, for turning in their homework, for keeping on top of assignments, for getting themselves in the right classroom at the right time, all that kind of thing. We don't necessarily teach kids how to do that. We just tell them they need to and hope that they can figure it out. This family is also frustrated because they just keep getting the same recommendations. Active listening by taking notes. You probably have heard that before. Using an agenda or using a calendar, a assignment book or something like that. But he forgets to write stuff in the agenda. Sounds so much like my children when they were growing up. And they're now grown up and successful, and goodness knows I wish I knew then what I've learned now. But let's unpack some of these things. Working memory, time management, planning, prioritizing, all of those are keys to concerns about executive functions. And perhaps you'll remember as I talk about this all the time, there are 3 executive functions. One is working memory, and that's the ability to hold information in our minds while we think about it. So remembering something long enough to write it in your agenda, remembering what the steps are in solving a math problem and staying on track of that while you're doing it. Those are absolutely the kinds of things that we need working memory for. There are 2 others. One is inhibitory control, and another is cognitive flexibility. Inhibitory control, pretty much what it sounds like. It's how we stop ourselves from doing something we otherwise would do. And inhibitory and cognitive flexibility, our ability to adapt, to shift gears, to rebound when our first attempt to solve a problem doesn't work. And all of those kinds of things are also going to be involved with keeping track of and time management and planning and prioritizing. If we can't imagine different scenarios and the steps that are involved to get there, we're not going to be able to come up with a good plan. If we can't hold a bunch of things in our minds while we evaluate them, we can't figure out what the top priority is. So all of these, when they get put together, and especially when they get combined with our reasoning skills, are really the crux of the difficulty that most kids have with these, with self-organization, self-regulation, and keeping on top of whatever the assignment is. In terms of an ADHD evaluation, that may be something that you want to do. I have a few thoughts myself about ADHD evaluations, one of which is that they are a clinical diagnosis. So it doesn't necessarily tell us much of anything about how a child learns. There are, stereotypical behaviors related to ADHD, but for a lot of kids, they don't match up exactly to those expected kinds of behaviors. They may not be hyperactive. They may not have difficulties. They may hyperfocus. They may do all kinds of things that don't really match up exactly with what we tend to think of as the diagnosis. And the diagnosis doesn't necessarily tell us how strong their working memory, their executive function, other executive functions, how strong their reasoning skills are, how good their memory skills are. And all of that can get in the way of being successful academically and the kind of planning and prioritizing and time management that this mom talks about. They're reaching out to counselors at school, but it's probably counselors at school and other classroom teachers. She doesn't say exactly who provided these recommendations, but typical compensatory strategies. So when kids struggle with learning and when there is especially if there's a diagnosis or there is a label like ADHD, the responses in the education system in general are three things. One is accommodations. Two is modifications to the curriculum. And the third is compensatory strategies. So if you have a child who learns differently, and if you have a child with one of these labels, it's very likely that you've encountered these responses to your child's needs. And they can be helpful, but they fall short many, many times. Accommodations are workarounds. It's a way of, for example, eliminating distractions. Well, probably by the time he's 13, this child has been told a million times, don't sit where you're going to be distracted. Remove all the distractions when you're doing your homework. He's probably doing that, but it still is taking him a long, long time. The second, modifications to the curriculum, unlikely that he's going to be able to have much of that when he gets into high school. Certainly not if he doesn't have that diagnosis and an IEP, an individualized education plan. But that's also working around things, and it's lowering expectations. It's saying it's okay if you can't do everything that you want to do or that you should be doing at this level of your schooling. And then the compensatory strategies. So if someone has difficulty sustaining their attention or difficulty keeping track of what the teacher is saying while they're taking notes, that people who are trying to be helpful may suggest this active listening. So you're listening and you're trying to, at the same time, capture that information, but in a way that is actively thinking about what it is and what it means and why it's important. And that's really hard. It's hard to do for many of us. It's hard to, and it's especially hard if we don't have that capacity and working memory. It's hard enough to listen. We've heard so many kids who said, I can't take notes because I fall behind. I'm trying to listen to what the teacher says, but I'm still taking notes, and then they moved on to another point, and now I'm lost. And now what do I do? So there's no amount of active listening and note taking that's going to help with that. Using an agenda, really important, because we have a hard time remembering a list of things to do. We want to write them down. Writing down is a very standard, and frankly, pretty effective compensatory strategy in a lot of cases. We all do this, right? We write down our to-do lists. I don't want to forget to, I need to stop and get milk on the way home from the office. I need to make an appointment for the back to school checkups. So we have a list of things because our minds can only hold so many things at one time, and so that we don't forget something. So it's a strategy, but again, it's a workaround, and it will not help in that moment of I can't take my notes, or in that moment of I may forget to put something in the agenda because I can't keep those things in mind while I'm even writing those things. So those are some of those challenges, and really, it's such a critical time when you have a 13-year-old who's probably been experiencing this kind of frustration for many years, at least through middle school. A lot of kids who are very bright, and this kid sounds like he's probably a really bright kid because he's able to get good grades. He just sticks it out. He just buckles down and works on it until he's done. And he goes back and checks things and makes sure he didn't miss something. And all of that takes an enormous amount of time, which is depriving him of some of the joyful things in life and some of the breaks that he needs, because kids will get burnt out just the way we get burnt out when we're in a really intensive work environment. So we can get burnt out, we can get frustrated, we can eventually kind of give up and say, well, maybe it's not worth working that hard. Maybe I can slack off a little bit and not get an A and can live with an A- or B+. And that may be fine, except if you're capable and if you have the ability, and if all that's lacking is building up those underlying cognitive skills, then you're missing so much opportunity. And I think what parents need to understand is that these skills can be strengthened to a far greater degree than most people realize. So a lot of the families and kids that we work with struggle with executive functions. Many struggle with other cognitive skills as well, but processing speed and flexible thinking and working memory are probably the three biggest areas of struggle. And those are going to impact performance in everything, whether it's reading or math or history or science. The process of keeping things in mind and taking notes and listening to the teachers, very similar. It doesn't matter whether it's English or math or science or social studies or whatever it might be. And so we can build those, and it does translate into improved performance. And it means for kids like this one that they don't have to spend all of their time studying and doing homework, and that they do have time. We have lots of kids who have gone from 2 hours and more of homework to 30 minutes of homework. That's probably more on the younger end of things. But even in high school, there should be time for all those extracurricular activities to be a balanced human being. And we get a chance to exercise all of these learning skills and all of our capabilities in sports, in extracurricular activities, in theater, in debate, in chess, in whatever those things are that this young man aspires to. So if this sounds like your child, I really encourage you to explore what you can do, because those underlying skills can absolutely be developed, and actually in a pretty short period of time. It's now, it is August 5th. And so a lot of schools, there's some schools that are starting this week, some not starting for a week or two, and some starting, maybe there's still a few that start after Labor Day. But basically, between now and September, October, November, between now and Thanksgiving, everything can change. Cognitive skills can be many times stronger, can be much, much stronger, significantly, measurably, and in a way that has started to impact academics. So if you have a child who's going back to school, or who has even started, or is in that early stages, especially if they're in a transition between elementary and middle school, or middle school and high school. This is really a time to think seriously about helping them and supporting them in strengthening their learning capacity. I'll put a link to a parent training session that we do that has some great information on cognitive skills and what cognitive skills training is all about. So I encourage you to watch that. So that'll be in the link below this video. Anyway, have a great day and good luck with all that back to school activity.